Okay, so we've gone through two wins for the Federalist. The enumerated powers gives a long list of powers to Congress, and when you read those powers, you see that they are resolving issues from the Articles, particularly the weaknesses, economic weaknesses from the Articles are addressed, like the power to tax. And to counterbalance that, Article 1, Section 9 denies powers to Congress, and that appeases the anti-federalists because it denies powers to Congress, thereby protecting individual rights. The Federalists have the Supremacy Clause. The Supremacy Clause in Article 6 asserts that when federal and state law conflict, then federal law trumps state law. To counterbalance that, which upon reading it at first you'd go, wow, the federal government is making, or the Federalists are getting a big win here. The Anti-Federalists got the 10th Amendment, the last amendment of the Bill of Rights, known as the Reserve Powers or the States' Rights Amendment. And that one assures that if a power is not given to the United States government by way of the Constitution, and it's not one of those denied powers that a state can't do, well, then it's left to the states. So this is known as the States' Rights Amendment. And there's no specific power given because potentially there's infinite powers. And that also explains why 95% of the law you live under is state law, because it's the states have a huge sphere of power and influence in your life. Okay, our third big win for the Federalists would be the denied powers. And here, denied powers apply to the states. So if I can point out, there's kind of a logic in the documents. Article 1, Section 8, powers of Congress. Article 1, Section 9, denied powers to Congress. And then more denied powers, but these are the ones that the state doesn't have. So things like the power to coin money or enter into war or sign treaties. States don't have those powers. So an explicit list of what states cannot do. And the Anti-Federalists get an explicit list of what the federal government can't do. The Bill of Rights, it does protect your rights and your freedoms, but the way liberties are secured is by limiting the government. So technically the Bill of Rights is more of a list of what the government can't do, thereby protecting you. And just to underline that, if you look at the First Amendment, look at the first few words of the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Nowhere does it say you have religious freedom. Nowhere does it say you have a right to believe whatever you want. But it says Congress cannot make a law imposing the religion, and it can't make a law that prohibits you from the free exercise of your religion. So the Bill of Rights is protecting individual liberties by way of limiting the federal government. All right, so for this, we've gone through the debate. Now we've seen in the Constitution the evidence of the compromises made. And let's look at the implications. The implications of this compromise. Well, boy, you live under two levels of government, and they can often conflict, and both the federal and the state government often have real standing, real constitutional standing for their side. So we have continuing tension between federal and state governments. This continuing tension is really what politics is about most of the time. When we're talking about a political, controversial topic, it often can be boiled down to federal power versus state power. So whether we're talking about marriage or legalization or education, it really comes down to that struggle for power between the two levels of government. Okay, and now for our final set of compromises, the free states versus the slave states. Not really a compromise, because slavery continued to exist after the Constitution was written. And so the issue, well, it would be slavery and property rights. So free states would argue that slavery is morally reprehensible, and slave states might argue that slaves are their property. And if this new government wants to outlaw slavery, thereby freeing their slaves, this new government is taking their property. You could see how both sides, free states and slave states, have some ground in Lockean ideas about natural rights. So this issue is really not a compromise. The slave states win, even though you cannot find the word slave or slavery in this document. We know that this document does support and endorse the institution of slavery. Ultimately, this debate's not fully resolved until the Civil War. And that's how essential this debate was. I think the delegates in Philadelphia were aware that this is a make-or-break deal for this country. And so a compromise had to be struck, otherwise achieving the 9 out of 13 votes required could not have happened. So these are 3 places where slavery is directly endorsed, even without the word slave or slavery. And that's evidence that the framers knew that they were allowing for something that was morally reprehensible. It's something that internationally would be a problem for the United States government to deal with, because other countries had already eliminated slavery. So Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3. So this is your practice to see if you can get to Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3. Easy as 1, 2, 3. Article 1 is all about the legislative branch. Section 2, Paragraph 3. So if it's in Section 2, it has something to do with the House of Representatives, but we have to figure out what it also has to do with slavery. So when you read through Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3, you'll read through it and you'll realize you're at the 3/5 compromise. And that section has brackets around it. That's because the 3/5 compromise is no longer lawful. What makes it no longer lawful is the 14th Amendment. So in your Constitution, you have brackets around those words. That indicates that that no longer is valid. But we never delete words from the Constitution. We leave that as part of the historical record. We add an amendment to change the Constitution or to add something to the Constitution. So Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3 is the 3/5 compromise. And take a minute to look at the wording and note how they creatively get around using the term slave or slavery. Now go to Article 1, Section 9, Paragraph 1. We've already learned what is the theme of Article 1, Section 9. Those are the denied powers, powers denied to Congress. So what here is being denied to Congress? Pause it as you read through this. Okay, so what you can see here is it's saying that Congress cannot prohibit the importation of slaves until 1808. So this gives them a good, chunk of time to still import slaves. But by 1808, Congress at that point can prohibit the importation of slaves. There are no brackets around this one because it's got written into its expiration date. So again, you can see the creative way to get around using the wording of slave or slavery. And now go finally to Article 4, Section 2, Paragraph 3. Article 4 is all about states' obligations to one another. So you could write states' obligations at the top if you want. If you go to Section 2, Paragraph 3, this one is also in brackets, and it was changed or eliminated by way of the 13th Amendment. So read through that, see if you can figure it out. Pause this. Okay. This is the Fugitive Slave Clause. This says that if a slave flees to a free state, is not necessarily free, the burden is placed on that state, the free state, to return him to the slave owner. So these are 3 places in the Constitution where we know the framers were at least embarrassed enough about slavery to not use the word, but still did continue to support the institution. This they knew would be tenuous, but it was the compromise made in the months of deliberation in order to actually get the 9 out of 13 votes. So implications of these compromises. Slavery continued. Slavery continued, and it continued to be a threat to the country's survival until the Civil War resolves the issue and abolishes slavery. So just to kind of summarize, we needed 9 states to agree, but many of the states had overlapping interests, and then on other topics they were divided. So it complicated the negotiation. And the negotiation does continue today, not with regards to slavery, and not necessarily with regards to big and small states, that a little bit, but mostly there are still tensions with regards to the division of power between the federal and the state governments. So those are the constitutional compromises.